She's a sweet girl, Rowan. But let's be honest, she didn't exactly marry down. That's what my mother-in-law said at Easter dinner, year 3, while I was 2 feet behind her refilling water glasses. She said it to her friend Helen, but she said it at full table volume. She knew I was standing there. She just didn't think it mattered. My name is Gemma. I'm 33. I'm a forensic accountant at a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio, which means I spend my days finding money that people hide. I'm good at it. I drive a 2018 Honda Accord with 94,000 miles and a scratch on the rear bumper from a Costco cart I will never forgive. I own one expensive thing, a Le Creuset Dutch oven I bought myself after my second raise. I named it. Her name is Lorraine. I'm not going to explain that. For 7 years, my in-laws called me a gold digger. At dinners, at holidays, at my own wedding rehearsal, though that one was whispered, which I suppose was their version of restraint. They said it the way you'd mention the weather. Casually. Constantly. Like it was just the temperature of the room, and I should dress accordingly. What they didn't know, what nobody knew except Rowan and me, was that for the last 3 of those 7 years, I'd been paying their mortgage. $1,400 a month. From my checking account. The Zanesville girls' money, keeping the Gehenna house standing while the people inside it decided I wasn't worth a matching place setting. I have a key to that house. Rowan gave it to me on our wedding day, brass on a plain ring. So you always feel welcome, he said. I carried it for 6 years. Never once used it. Every Sunday, every holiday, I knocked. I stood on the porch with a dish in my hands and waited for someone to open the door. To a house I was paying for. My hands knew the weight of that casserole dish better than the weight of that key. If you've ever given everything to people who've decided you have nothing, stay with me. This one is going to sit differently. To understand why I kept paying and what happened the night I stopped, I need to take you back 7 years. To a rehearsal dinner. And a woman in a cream-colored blouse who looked me up and down and decided, before the bread arrived, exactly what I was worth. I need to be fair, because there was a version of Lucinda I almost loved. The first time I met her, she was standing at the front door of the Gehenna house in an apron that looked ironed. I didn't know people ironed aprons, and she pulled me inside by both hands. Not a handshake. Both hands, like she'd been waiting. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and something roasting. She poured me a glass of wine without asking if I wanted one. She told me Rowan had been impossible to live with since he met me. She said it like a compliment. I think she meant it. Conrad shook my hand at the kitchen table. Firm. Steady. Welcome to the family, Gemma. He had a voice that filled a room without trying. He asked me about my work. Actually asked the way people ask when they intend to listen. I told him I was finishing my forensic accounting certification. He nodded. Good head on your shoulders, he said. That night, driving home, I called my mother. I said, they're wonderful. My mother, who has worked in a school cafeteria for 26 years and has never once used the word wonderful without suspicion, said, give it a holiday. She was off for one holiday. It took 2. The thing about growing up in Zanesville is that you learn a particular operating system. You show up early. You bring a dish. You don't ask for anything until you've proven you don't need it. You earn your chair at the table by being useful enough that removing you would be inconvenient. I brought this operating system into a family that ran on a completely different one. The Hartleys didn't earn their chairs. They were assigned them by Lucinda, who decided the seating chart for every gathering the way a general decides troop positions. Where you sat told you where you stood. I was always near the kitchen door, in case anyone needed anything. I told myself it was practical. I was closest to the stove. It made sense. It made sense for 7 years. I was very committed to making things make sense. Year 1. The rehearsal dinner. Lucinda introduced me to her book club friends. This is Rowan's girlfriend. She works in accounting, is it? She'd been told 3 times. She'd met me 4 months earlier and remembered my shoe size. She'd complimented my boots in the hallway. She remembered my boots. She forgot my career. That arithmetic has a name. I just didn't know it yet. That same evening, she introduced Imogen's husband, Rowan's sister's husband, a dental surgeon, by full title, practice name, and the fact that he'd just gotten back from a dental mission trip to Guatemala. She said dental surgeon the way some people say or hero. I stood there holding a gin and tonic I hadn't asked for and smiled until my face found a shape it could hold for the rest of the night. Year 2. Christmas. Lucinda gave everyone gifts she'd selected personally. A cashmere scarf for Imogen. A leather-bound journal for Conrad with his initials on the cover. For Rowan, a watch. Not expensive, but chosen. She'd matched the band to his favorite jacket. For me, a $50 gift card to a boutique in Bexley. I wasn't sure what you'd like, she said. She'd known me for 2 years. She knew I drank Earl Grey, not English breakfast. She knew I preferred chicken to beef. She knew I parked at the end of the driveway. She knew everything about me except the parts that would require her to care. I used the gift card the following weekend. The boutique sold scarves for $200. I bought the bottom half of one. It covered nothing, but it was from Bexley, which I suppose made it aspirational. Year 3. Easter. The water glass moment. You already heard what she said. But there was something else that evening, something smaller, something I filed in the same drawer where I keep things I'm not ready to look at. After dinner, I was in the hallway, reaching for my coat. Through the screen door to the garden, I heard Helen's voice, Lucinda's oldest friend, the one with opinions and a voice that carries. Lucinda says she's a gold digger. Married up. A laugh, not cruel exactly, but comfortable. The laugh of a woman repeating something she's heard enough times to believe. Lucinda didn't correct her. I heard the wine glass set down. I heard the garden chair shift. I heard nothing else. I put my coat on. I zipped it slowly, one tooth at a time, because my hands needed something to do that wasn't shaking. On the drive home, I held the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Rowan was talking about the leftovers his mom had packed for us. I was calculating how many Sundays I'd spent in that house, how many dishes I'd carried, how many times I'd knocked on a door I had a key to. But here's what I didn't know yet, what none of us knew. In 2 years, the people calling me a gold digger would be 4 months behind on their own mortgage. And I, the girl from Zanesville with the half-price scarf, would be the one holding the checkbook. I should tell you about my flaws. Not the kind you confess on a first date. I care too much or I work too hard. The real kind. The kind that lets people take from you for years while you hold the door open and call it love. I don't ask questions. Not because I'm slow. I reconcile financial discrepancies for a living. I found the decimal that moved. I catch the invoice that doesn't exist. At work, I'm relentless. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I am the person who looks. At home, I perfected the opposite. I learned it in Zanesville, watching my mother stand at a kitchen counter after double shifts, never once complaining about the fact that my father's overtime was cut again. She didn't ask why. She adjusted. She found the coupon. She made the math work. Asking questions in our house was the same as admitting something was wrong. And admitting something was wrong was the same as not being strong enough to carry it. So when things started shifting at the Gahanna house, slowly, the way a foundation settles before anyone sees the crack, I noticed. And I said nothing. Year 4. Lucinda canceled the annual Christmas party. We're simplifying this year, she said, and nobody questioned it because Lucinda's decisions were not questioned. They were obeyed. But I saw what simplifying meant. It meant Conrad's Buick was 3 years older than it should have been. It meant Lucinda's salon appointment stopped. I noticed the roots before anyone else did, which tells you something about how carefully I watched a woman who never once watched me back. Year 5. The house started telling secrets. Gutters sagging on the south side. A water stain on the dining room ceiling that got a tablecloth thrown over the table beneath it, as if hiding the evidence downstairs solved the problem upstairs. The garden, Lucinda's garden, the one she photographed for the Christmas card every year, went to seed in patches. She blamed the weather. It hadn't been a bad season. I audit companies worth $40 million. I can read a balance sheet the way a cardiologist reads an EKG, rhythm, irregularity, and the pause before the collapse. And the Hartley household had the financial rhythm of a company burning through its reserves and praying for a good quarter that wasn't coming. But I said nothing, because asking would mean knowing, and knowing would mean deciding. And deciding would mean risking the one thing I still had, Rowan, who loved me, who I loved, who was already carrying something I could feel but couldn't name, a weight in his shoulders, a half-second delay before he laughed, a phone call from his father every other Sunday that he took in the garage with the door pulled shut. Then a Tuesday in October, year 5. Rowan came home and didn't take his shoes off. He stood in the kitchen doorway, coat still on, keys still in his hand, not in the dish, just gripped, and I knew from the architecture of his silence that something structural had failed. We sat at the kitchen table. He told me in pieces. Not all at once, in the halting, embarrassed fragments of a man dismantling his father's dignity one sentence at a time. Conrad's firm had lost its 2 biggest clients. Commercial real estate had dried up in their corridor. He'd been pulling from savings for 18 months. The savings were gone. The mortgage, $2,800 a month on the Gehenna house, was 4 months behind. $11,200. The bank had sent a letter. The kind of letter with a word in it that families like the Hartleys don't say out loud. Foreclosure. They'll lose the house, Gem. Rowan's voice was flat. The way things go flat when you've already cried about them alone, and now you're just reporting. Mom will never survive it. That house, I asked her. I sat with that for a moment. I looked at the table. At Rowan's hands, still holding the keys. In the kitchen around us, rented, small ours. How much do they need? $2,800 a month. I can cover half. But he didn't finish. He didn't need to. $1,400 a month. That was the silence at the end of his sentence. That was the space he left for me to walk into voluntarily, because asking directly would have broken something in him that was already bending. I did the math. Not because I needed time, because math is what I do instead of panicking. $1,400 a month. $16,800 a year. I had it. Barely. It meant no vacation. No savings increase. No down payment on the house we've been talking about. It meant choosing someone else's floor over our own foundation. One condition, I said. He looked up. They don't know it's from me. You routed through your account. They think you're helping. Not me. Why? Because if your mother finds out the gold digger is paying her mortgage, she'd rather lose the house. He didn't argue. He sat there for a long time, turning his keys in his hand, a slow rotation, like the tumblers of a lock he couldn't open. Then he nodded once. That evening, I set up the transfer. Automatic. The 14th of every month. $1,400 from my checking account to Rowan's. Memo line. Mom and Dad. I picked the 14th because it was the date of our first anniversary. Nobody would ever see that detail except me. But I needed it there. I needed at least one part of this arrangement to mean something that wasn't transactional. I sat in bed that night doing the arithmetic of what I'd just agreed to. Not the dollars, the other math. The kind you can't put in a spreadsheet. I was now paying a monthly premium to maintain my place in a family that had never offered me a seat. $1,400 a month. The same amount I'd paid for my student loans until 2 years ago. I'd traded Sally Mae for Lucinda Ashford Hartley. The interest rates were different, but the terms were identical. Pay on time, get nothing back, and don't you dare be late. That arrangement lasted 3 years. 36 payments. $50,400 from my account. And in those 3 years, while I kept their roof where it was, the insults didn't slow down. They got louder. Because there's something about financial desperation that makes certain people grip harder to the one thing they still think they have. And what Lucinda still had, what she held with both hands while everything else was slipping, was her certainty that she was better than the woman paying her mortgage. I didn't know it then, but that certainty had an expiration date. and it was printed on 36 bank statements with my name at the top. I want to describe what the next 3 years felt like, but the honest answer is they felt like math, like a subscription I forgot I was paying. $1,400 left my account on the 14th of every month, and I stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing a scar after enough time. It was just there, part of the topography of my life. What I didn't stop noticing was the commentary. Year 5. Thanksgiving. The Gehenna house. The one I was keeping. 11 people around a table set with Lucinda's good china. The china I could have bought with 2 months of mortgage payments. But who's counting? I was. I was always counting. I just never said the numbers out loud. Lucinda sat at the head of the table and told a story about her friend Diane's daughter-in-law. Married a surgeon, she said, slicing turkey with the precision of a woman who performed at meals. Smart girl. Knew what she was doing. She looked across the table at me. Not at me, through me, the way you look through a window to see the yard. Some girls are just luckier than others. I passed the cranberry sauce. I smiled. And I thought, I paid for this table. I paid for the chair you're sitting in. I paid for the roof that's keeping the November rain off your head while you tell me I'm not enough. I didn't say any of that. I said, these rolls are great, Lucinda. Did you use a new recipe? She had not used a new recipe. She'd been making the same rolls since 1991. But asking about the rolls was safer than saying what I was actually thinking, which would have required a level of honesty the Gehenna house was not structurally built to handle. Year 6. Rowan's birthday. A small gathering, family only. Conrad pulled Rowan into the hallway. I was in the kitchen, scraping plates. I could hear them through the half-open door. Son, your mother and I appreciate what you've been doing. More than you know. You stepped up when it mattered. That means something. A pause. Conrad's voice, quieter. Don't tell your sister. She'd worry. He thanked his son. For my money. I was standing 9 feet away, holding a plate with frosting on it from a cupcake I'd also paid for. The cupcake was dry. The party was dry. Everything about that afternoon had the moisture content of a napkin. Year 7. December. The Christmas card arrived in our mailbox. Lucinda's annual production. Professional photographer. The whole family posed in front of the fireplace mantle. I opened it at the kitchen counter. I wasn't in it. Not partially visible. Not in the background. Not there. Cropped clean, like a line item deleted from a budget. Rowan saw my face. He called his mother. She said the photographer recommended a tighter frame this year. You understand, don't you, Gemma? It's the framing. It was always the framing. 7 years, and it was always something I was supposed to understand. The seating, the gift card, the career she couldn't remember, the Christmas card she remembered to exclude me from. I was supposed to understand all of it, absorb all of it, and keep writing checks while they cropped me out of the picture my money developed. The following week, I sat across from Miriam at a sandwich place near our office. She'd been watching me for months, watching the way colleagues watch when they can see the cracks but don't want to point at them. You look tired, Gemma. I'm fine. You've been fine for 3 years. That's a long time to be fine. She took off her reading glasses, the ones she wore like a weapon, the ones that came off only when she was about to say something she meant completely. You're auditing their life and expending your dignity. That's not generosity. That's a bad deal. It's for Rowan. Does Rowan know what it's costing you? Not the money, the other thing. What other thing? Your self-respect. Does he know you're running out? I picked up my napkin, folded it in half, unfolded it, folded it again, thirds this time, the way I always fold things when my hands need a job my mouth won't do. I didn't answer her. Not because I didn't know, because the answer was a door I wasn't ready to open yet. That evening, I did something small. I took the brass key off my keychain, the one Rowan gave me on our wedding day, the one I'd never used. I opened the junk drawer in our kitchen, the one with the dead batteries and the takeout menus from places that closed during the pandemic, and I dropped it in. I didn't throw it away. That would have been a decision. This was just a postponement. But my keychain was lighter. And I noticed. The moment it broke wasn't dramatic. There was no argument. No slammed door. No wine glass was thrown across a kitchen. It was a Sunday brunch in September. Year 7. Mimosas. Imogen's house. The dental surgeon's house. The one with heated floors and a refrigerator that dispensed sparkling water, which is a sentence I never imagined myself saying with a straight face. Lucinda was in her element. The kind of morning she was built for, cloth napkins, everyone performing closeness, and a table full of people who agreed with her because disagreeing required energy none of them were willing to spend. She was talking about Rowan, about how proud she was, about how he'd stepped up when the family needed him. She used that phrase, stepped up, like she was pinning a medal on him. She turned to Imogen's husband and said, "Not every son would do what Rowan's done. He gets that from his father." Then she looked at me. That look, the one I'd been receiving for 7 years. Warm on the surface, temperature-controlled underneath. "And you, sweetheart, you're lucky to have a provider like him." I set my fork down. It barely made a sound against the plate. Maybe a click. Maybe nothing. But something in that click, or in the absence of the sound I expected, shifted something behind my ribs. Not anger. Not sadness. Something flatter. Something with edges. I looked at Lucinda sitting in a chair that existed because of my checking account, in a house that was standing because of my silence, calling her son a provider while I provided for her. And I understood something I'd been circling for 3 years without landing on. It wasn't that they didn't see me. They saw me fine. They decided what I was, and no amount of evidence, not 36 payments, not $50,000, not 7 years of dishes and casseroles and parking at the end of the driveway, was going to change the label they'd assign me before the bread arrived at my rehearsal dinner. I could pay for 100 years. I could buy the house outright and hand Lucinda the deed in a gift bag with a bow. She would still look at me and see Zanesville. That evening, our kitchen, the apartment with the one burner that runs hot, and the junk drawer with the brass key I'd stopped carrying. I opened my laptop, opened the bank account, 36 transfers, every 14th of every month, $50,400, documented, timestamped, my name on every line. I didn't make a speech. I made a spreadsheet. Then I called Rowan into the kitchen. He stood in the doorway, the same doorway he'd stood in 2.5 years ago with his coat still on and his keys still gripped. Different news this time. Same posture. "I'm going to stop the payments," I said. "Not today. But I'm going to tell them. They need to know where the money came from. Gemma, it'll destroy my mother. Your mother has spent 7 years destroying me at her dinner table." I smiled through all of it. "That's stopping." He was quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, the kind that's full of things a person has known for a long time and never had the nerve to say out loud. When? Christmas. At dinner. In front of everyone. He didn't argue. I think he'd been waiting for me to say it. I think some part of him had been waiting since the night he sat at this table with his coat on and asked me, without asking, to carry something he couldn't carry alone. He just didn't have the courage to set it down first. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. The refrigerator hummed. The faucet dripped. It had been dripping for weeks, and neither of us had fixed it, which felt like a metaphor I wasn't in the mood to examine. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I slept better than I had in 3 years. Christmas dinner. Year 7. The Gehenna house. The table was set for 11. Lucinda's good china. The set with the gold rims she'd bought on a trip to Vermont the year before I started paying her mortgage, which is a detail I keep because forensic accountants keep details. They're the only currency no one can devalue. The tree was in the corner by the window. Ornaments from Pottery Barn, arranged by color. A cloth runner down the center of the table. Ivory, pressed, not a wrinkle. The house smelled like pine and roast beef and the particular warmth of a home that doesn't know it almost became a bank's property 3 years ago. 11 people. Conrad at the head. Lucinda to his left, Imogen and her husband. Helen, of course Helen, Lucinda's chorus, the woman who'd called me a gold digger through a screen door 4 years earlier, like she was commenting on the weather. Rowan beside me. His hand found mine under the table once, briefly, a squeeze, then let go. He knew what was coming. I told him that morning, standing at the bathroom mirror, both of us brushing our teeth in the kind of silence that happens when two people are preparing for something they can't rehearse. The folder was in the car, in my coat pocket on the passenger seat. 36 bank statements. Printed. Highlighted. My name on every one. But first, dinner. I ate. I passed the dishes. I complimented the rolls, which had not changed since 1991 and would not change if Lucinda lived to 200, because some things in that house were permanent, and I was not one of them. Then Lucinda stood. She lifted her glass. The room goes half quiet, the shift that happens when a family recognizes the cue for performance. I want to thank God for this beautiful family, she said. For Conrad, who has been my rock. Conrad nodded. He looked tired. He'd been looking tired for 3 years, but tonight it sat deeper, in the skin around his eyes, in the way his collar seemed looser than it should have been. For Rowan, the backbone of this family, the one who stepped up when it mattered. She looked at me. That look. 7 years of that look. And, of course, Gemma. 7 years, and still sticking around. A laugh. Light. Musical. The kind of laugh that sounds generous if you don't listen too carefully. Helen raised her glass. Lucinda, you raised a generous boy. Not everyone would take on so much for their parents. Lucinda beamed. Rowan gets that from his father. I set my wine glass on the table. The base met the cloth with a sound so small only Rowan heard it. He looked at me. I gave him one nod. The nod we'd agreed on. The one that meant now. Before we finish, I said. My voice was level, not loud. The volume you use when you've been rehearsing a sentence for 3 months and you've finally decided to let it out of your chest. I want to give everyone a Christmas gift. From me. I stood up. I walked to the hallway, got my coat, took the folder out, came back, set it on the table between the gravy boat and the good china, right in the center of the ivory runner Lucinda had pressed that morning. Open it, I said. Conrad reached for it first. His hands were slower than they used to be, the hands of a man who'd spent 3 years watching his life contract and thanking his son for the oxygen. He opened the folder. Read the first page. A bank statement. My checking account. Transfer line. $1,400 to Rowan Hartley. Memo. Mom and Dad. He turned the page. Another statement. Same transfer. Next month. And the next. And the next. He read 4 pages without looking up. On the 5th, his hand stopped moving. He set the paper down. His jaw did something I'd never seen, not a clench, not a tremble. A release. Like a muscle that had been held tight for years suddenly remembering it was allowed to let go. He looked at me. Directly. For maybe the first time in 7 years. Not through me, not past me, not at a version of me that was easier to dismiss. At me. His eyes were wet. He didn't speak. That's $50,400, I said. 36 months of payments. From my checking account. Forensic accountant salary. Zanesville girls' money. Lucinda reached across and took the folder from Conrad. She read the first page fast, the way she read everything, scanning for the conclusion, skipping the evidence. Then she slowed down. Her fingers stopped on my name, on the transfer amount, on the memo line she was never supposed to see. I don't, she looked at Rowan. Did you know about this? Yes, Mom. I asked her. She said yes. You were going to lose the house. Why didn't you tell me? I answered before Rowan could. Because you would have rather lost the house than accepted help from someone you think isn't good enough. The table was quiet. Not the polite quiet of a family gathering finding its rhythm. The structural quiet. The quiet that happens when the floor shifts and everyone is checking their balance. Lucinda tried. I'll give her that. She straightened in her chair, reached for the composure she'd worn like armor for 7 years, and said, "We would have figured something out. We didn't need." "You needed me, Lucinda." I said it the way I say numbers at work. Without heat. Without performance. The way you state a figure that is simply, documentably, on the record. For 3 years, you needed me. You just couldn't say it. So you called me a gold digger instead. Because that was easier than admitting the girl from Zanesville was the only one writing checks. Helen excused herself to the bathroom. She didn't come back for 11 minutes. I didn't count. Rowan did. He told me later in the car. Imogen was staring at the folder. She looked at her husband, the dental surgeon, the one Lucinda introduced by full title and mission trip. Then at me. Quietly. I didn't know they were in trouble. No one did, I said. That was the arrangement. I picked up my coat. Rowan stood beside me. I didn't slam anything. I didn't raise my voice. There was nothing left to raise. 7 years of absorbing had emptied me of every loud thing I'd ever carried. What was left was just clear. At the front door, I stopped, reached into my coat pocket. The brass key, the one I'd taken off my keychain months ago, the one that had been sitting in the junk drawer next to dead batteries and a takeout menu from a Thai place that closed in 2022. I'd taken it out that morning. I knew I'd need it one last time. I set it on the hall table, next to the coat hooks. 4 hooks, Conrad's, Lucinda's, Rowan's, and Imogen's. There had never been a 5th. In 7 years, nobody had added one. I used to think that was an oversight. It wasn't. Oversights get corrected. This was a decision no one wanted to say out loud. "You can have this back," I said. "I won't need it anymore." I opened the door, stepped through it, pulled it shut behind me. Not a slam. A click. The smallest sound in the house. The last sound I made in a home I'd paid for and was never invited into. 3 months later. A Saturday in March. Our apartment, the new one, 2 towns over, the one with the kitchen where the counter space is minimal and the stove has 1 burner that runs hot and the window faces a street where nobody knows my maiden name or my in-laws' opinion of it. I'm cooking. Lorraine is on the stove. The look crews it, not a person. Rowan is setting the table. 3 places tonight. Miriam is coming at 7 with a bottle of wine that cost exactly what she wanted to spend, and she will walk through our door without knocking because she was invited and she knows it. 3 chairs. A small table. All of them match. Conrad called twice in January. Left voicemails. He cleared his throat both times. Long pauses where words should have been, filled with the sound of a man learning a language he'd never spoken. On the second voicemail, he said, "Thank you." Just that. 2 words in a voice that sounded like it was being used for the first time. I haven't called back. I will. I'm just not ready to decide what that conversation looks like yet. And I've learned slowly, expensively, that not being ready is not the same as not caring. Lucinda hasn't called. I don't know if she will. I've stopped predicting. Predictions were just another way of waiting for someone else to decide my worth. I did that for 7 years. The subscription has been canceled. The junk drawer in this apartment has no brass key in it. I left it on the hall table in Gehenna, next to 4 coat hooks and a door I'll never knock on again. I don't need a key to someone else's house anymore. I have my own door. And everyone who walks through it was actually invited. I spent 7 years paying for a seat at a table that was never mine. $50,400 and 1,000 quiet insults. The math was always wrong. I just didn't want to see the audit. Some people measure love in what they receive. I measured mine in what I was willing to absorb. That's not love. That's an invoice nobody asked for. And I finally closed the account. If you're somewhere right now, paying a price no one asked you to name, for people who've decided what you're worth before you've even sat down, you already know the math doesn't work. You've known for a while. You just haven't closed the books yet. I'll have another one of these whenever you're ready.